Welcome back, Cubs. Dire Wolf here, and today I want to talk to you about racial and cultural differences. I'll be responding to a video that was given to me by the YouTuber named Schwinn Wiggins. The video Mr. Wiggins sent me was a response and commentary on an event where an elderly white woman went up to a party at a house and asked the all-black group to reduce the volume of the music. In response to her request, they mocked her. One man grabbed her from behind and body slammed her on the ground and then threw her into the pool, which separated her from her small dog, and also it's reported that she almost drowned. This entire disgusting event was caught completely on camera, and it was made worse by not a single one of the partygoers seeming to think this was the wrong thing to do. In fact, many of them laughed. Clearly it's wrong for anyone to body slam anyone and then throw them into the pool. That is assault. It is even worse when the target of the assault is someone who is feeble and defenseless. It shows at best a very despicable disregard for the life of that person, and at worst, a very deeply ingrained hatred for that person, or their race, to make you feel okay assaulting and possibly risking killing someone from that group. And this situation is not as simple as someone assaulting and nearly killing another person, because not a single person in that entire group attempted to stop this event from happening or to try to help the woman after the event had taken place. The entire group showed a shocking acceptance and approval of the assault of this poor woman, which implies in this community and in this place there is a cultural problem where people think that this is okay. This is definitely not okay, but it's important that we recognize what the problem is. The problem is a cultural problem. If you don't recognize what the real problem is, then you cannot fix it. Before I move on to responding to Schwinn Wiggins' comments, I want to make a very important distinction for this conversation between someone's race and someone's culture. These people are black, and they did very wrong and evil things. However, they did not do these things because they are black. They likely did these things because they live in a culture that has conditioned them and taught them that this is an okay course of action. This does not make them less guilty. They should all be punished for their crimes. However, we can punish them, but that will not solve the problem of teaching people like them to do these things in the future. The short-term solution is to punish them for their actions to discourage this from happening again, but the long-term solution is to fix the culture that creates people who think like this. Unfortunately, a lot of people are going to mistakenly use this video as evidence for why they cannot trust and why they should hate black people. But let me be clear, these people who are black represent a real problem in our society, but they do not represent all black people. Now we can move on to Schwinn Wiggins' response video. Now this is not a straight-up collab because it's more of a discussion. See, I agree with some things Schwinn Wiggins says, but I also disagree with other things, and I want to have a discussion with him. Alright, Schwinn Wiggins, tell me what you think about this video.
This situation exemplifies the problem with the black community, not the action itself. There are plenty of white people capable of doing something like this, and worse.
I agree that every race has people that are capable of doing very evil things. Clarify, this is not a problem that exists in all communities that are predominantly black. This is a problem in impoverished and undereducated communities, who have been conditioned by their schools and their media to be victims and to blame others for their current situation, who have been taught to distrust and hate the government while at the same time being dependent on it, whose culture glorifies immoral and violent behavior, which leads them to mimic this thug life, which puts them in trouble with the law, which leads to profiling, additional policing, and reinforces the distrust and hatred of police and the government. These same behaviors and outcomes can be observed in other communities of other races, including but not limited to both Mexican and white communities in California. And when you add the fact that political leaders and our educational system are stoking the flames of racial tensions by blaming white people rather than the social engineering that has been creating hateful and violent people. Not all predominantly black communities believe these things or act this way. Educated, wealthy, and socially secure black communities in America do not act like this, because their culture is very different, and it is not their race that makes them do these things, it is their culture, in addition to their personal choices.
The difference is, such a white person would not feel confident doing something like this in front of a white crowd, because in a crowd of whites, no matter how drunk or belligerent or rowdy, the second someone grabbed the old lady in this way, at least a few people would have grabbed him, stopped him, and possibly beat the living fuck out of him. Even if he was quick enough to grab the old lady and throw her in the pool, the reaction would be completely different.
This is where I disagree. There are other racial groups that have similar cultures that hate other racial groups, including cultures of impoverished, undereducated white people who, in their community, would be okay with harming black people. During the days of slavery, some American cultures taught a dehumanizing view of black people which allowed them to kill them and hang them without feeling bad about it, because the government and the culture taught them to hate black people or to value them as being less than human. In the same way, black communities like this are being taught to dehumanize and hate white people, and this is the result.
Far from giggling and encouraging and running away, there would be shock and outrage. People would rush to help the old lady, and should the perpetrator get away, people from the crowd, even his own friends, would be lining up to tell the police what happened.
Yes, but only if that white community's culture taught that those actions were wrong. And yes, maybe most white communities in America do teach it's wrong. But if that white community had the same culture as this black community, then they most likely act in the exact same way.
What allowed this to happen is the same kind of group mentality that allows for the prevalence of spontaneous gang rapes, robberies, and mob violence in the black community.
Just like any other racial community with a similar culture, such as the Muslim culture in Stockholm, Sweden. You can be any shade of skin color and still be Muslim. But if the Muslim culture teaches the hatred of people who are not part of the group, teaches that it's okay to steal from, and burn down their homes, and rape, and kill those people, then you will see people from many different countries and racial backgrounds all united under the same sadistic culture. Because it is not their race that teaches them what is moral and what is acceptable, it is their culture that teaches them what is moral and what is acceptable.
Again, there are white people capable and willing to do these type of crimes, but due to the dynamics of white communities, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for them to quickly form a loosely affiliated group to commit such spontaneous crimes. A white person walking around his white neighborhood, no matter how poor and transient it might be, would not feel confident asking casual acquaintances if they felt like going to commit a robbery, an assault, or a rape, as he knows that the reaction is likely to be rejection, quickly followed by social and possibly legal consequences.
Again, a white person would feel secure doing these things if they were brought up in a culture that taught that these things were acceptable. A black man from this culture could not go to a well-educated, wealthy neighborhood and go to a black person who lived there and convince him to go rob a liquor store. Because it is not their race that makes it socially acceptable, it is the culture that they are raised in.
However, a black person walking around a black neighborhood would have no problem attempting to solicit such assistance in a criminal endeavor, confident that the response would be either yes or a no, without any possible consequences.
If they go up to a black guy in my community and ask him if he wants to commit a crime, that black guy will call the police and have him arrested by a cop who may actually be black. And I'm fairly certain if they went up to any well-educated and wealthy black man and offered to commit a crime with them, they would not only say no, they would also report them, because they have a different culture.
White communities, even though they have their own criminal class, are willing and able to police themselves in a way that black communities aren't.
But this is not because they are white, it is because of the cultural norms in their community, and the people within a community will enforce the cultural norms of what is and is not acceptable.
From an early age, black people who grow up in ghettoized areas are told at home, at school, and even by the mainstream media that they are the victims of white oppression and therefore will never be allowed to succeed at anything. They are also entrenched in a culture where violence and defiance of authority are the norm, and all white people are the enemy.
That is right. Those are the things being taught in those areas and in those cultures.
This tweet epitomizes the typical black response to this or any such crime. In case you're wondering, that's not a typo. That's just a black way of writing, I don't. So he says, I don't agree with what fool did, but death ain't gonna help a cracker catch a black dude. And that attitude right there, and the culture that nurtures it, is why the rates of criminality and violence are so disproportionately high in black communities and will continue to be until that culture changes.
Right here you hit the nail on the head. The fact of the matter is more black people by percentage live in undereducated and impoverished communities. These factors alone encourage more crime, but massively compounding the problem, government, media, and pop culture influences reinforce a culture that encourages crime, racism, government dependence, disrespect for authority, cycles of poverty, and nihilism. And though it is possible for very strong and determined people to break free from this culture, it is very hard to do so. And like you said, until we take steps to fix this culture and other cultures like it, then it will remain a cancer on our society. How do you fix the culture, you ask? First, start with the schools. Do not teach them that they are victims. Reward hard work and independence as well as moral and ethical behavior. Second, in the media and in pop culture, do not glorify drug use and violence, nor should you encourage cheating and the breakdown of the family. Stable families produce more wealth and pass it on to the next generation. And third, the government should encourage entrepreneurship and jobs in these impoverished communities, as well as not encourage indefinite government dependence, which is bad for the dependent and bad for the country as a whole. There's also several other ways that we could help fix this culture, but for the interest of time, I'm going to keep it at 3. But if you have some other ideas, please put them in the comments section. Direwolf out. If you want to hear Direwolf and Friends streaming live semi-daily on political and social commentary, as well as playing games like Quiplash and Drawful, please check out the YouTube channel Direwolf Radio, which is linked in the description of this video.